Hello, everybody. Welcome to Project Riverside. I am so glad you're joining us today. I am Steve, your host, and I thought I would do a series on the book of James. So here we are. The question is, who is James? Why did he write this book? And what's in the book that we need to discover for ourselves that's meant for today also, not just then? So if we go back to the book of James itself, the big question is, well, who is James? Which James is this? And we know pretty much that it's not James the Apostle. And the reason why we're pretty sure it's not James the Apostle is because he was put to death by Herod around the time that this was being written. So the general consensus from the historians and the scholars are this was not one of the four Jameses, or he was not one of the four Jameses that was mentioned in the scriptures who wrote this book. And then there is two others who apparently, again, according to scholars and historians, weren't as strong, A, in their faith, but B, they weren't scholarly. So the writings don't match anything that would have come from them. So that leaves us with one other James that's mentioned in the Bible, right? And that one other James is Jesus' half-brother. And so when you think about it, it's really interesting that if you look back in Matthew chapter 13, verse 55. Now, Jesus had gone back to Nazareth, where he was, back to his hometown. And he was talking about these parables of the weed, of the hidden treasure and the pearl, parable of the net. And we come to the parable of, or the words of, a prophet without honor. And in it, in verse 55, that's chapter Matthew 13:55, he says, or the people were talking, saying, "Isn't this the carpenter's son? Isn't his mother's name Mary? And aren't his brothers James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas? Aren't all his sisters with us? Where then did this man get all these things?" And they took offense at him. But Jesus said to them, "A prophet is not without honor except in his own town and in his own home." And he did not do many miracles there because of their lack of faith. So right there we have James is one that is kind of doubting. He's not really believing his brother in what Jesus is saying. And the reason why I find that interesting is because of how he opens up his book, which we'll get there in a minute. Verse 1 is interesting. But the book of James is the start of, in the Bible, of what they called the general letters, right? And so what's a general letter? A general letter was just put out for everyone. It wasn't necessarily made for a specific person or a group. You know, Paul wrote letters to Timothy. Matthew wrote his own book. John typically wrote them to the Gentiles. These letters are just going to the early church. Now, James tended to side more towards the Jewish Christians that he was writing to. And again, we'll see that in a minute here. Whereas Paul was more missional to the Gentiles. So we have these letters. James is the start of it. 1st and 2nd Peter, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, and then Jude are the general letters that are written here. And in James 1:1, this is what's interesting, is that he must have at some point, and I'm assuming it would be after he saw Jesus after the resurrection. That would be my assumption. When he saw him personally, he really realized and became a pillar in the early church. But he starts off with James 1. It says, James, a servant of God and of the Lord Jesus. So right there he's saying, you know what? Hey, I'm a servant of God and basically my brother, Jesus Christ. But instead of using it as my brother as a bragging chip, it's more of he's a servant of God and his brother. Finally realizing who his brother was. And then he goes on to say, to the 12 tribes scattered amongst the nations. So that's kind of a reference to the tribes of Israel. He's putting that out there. It's just general to where everybody is. So then we look at the first section here. He talks about trials and tribulations, right? He starts in verse 2. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generous to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. But when you ask, you must believe and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. That person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Such a person is a double-minded and unstable person in all they do. Believers in humble circumstances ought to take pride in their high position, but the rich should take pride in their humiliation, since they will pass away like a wildflower. For the sun rises with scorching heat and withers the plant, its blossom falls and its beauty is destroyed. In the same way, the rich will fade away even while they go about their business. Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love him. When tempted, no one should say, God's tempting me. For God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he tempt anyone. But each person is tempted when they are dragged away by their own evil desire and enticed. Then, after desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is full grown, gives birth to death. Don't be deceived, my dear brothers and sisters. Every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of the heavenly lights, who does not change like shifting shadows. He chose to give us birth through the word of truth, that we might be a kind of first fruit in all he created. Wow, that's a lot. That's just the first section. So trials and temptations. There's actually a couple different sections in that first area from 1 to 18. You can kind of break this down into a couple different things. Talking about perseverance, going through the perseverance, let it finish its work so that you can be mature. Asking for wisdom. Don't be shifting around. Don't be saying, yeah, I believe, and then not really believe. Don't talk about God tempting you, because God does not tempt you. And then don't be deceived, how sin can actually affect us. But the trials and temptations. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance, and the perseverance finishes its work, so that you may be mature and complete. I always think about diamonds. Like how a diamond is made, it's made under pressure, right? It's just the pressure of the earth coming together, and it kind of just keeps pressing it and pressing it and pressing it and makes it into the diamond. And then certain colors of that diamond are all certain So it kind of reminds me of, I'm kind of a little bit of a how it's made buff. And I've watched a couple of those videos Pennsylvania makes or used to make. I don't know if they still do. Used to make videos on how it's made local. And down here, not too far from where I live, there's a plastics plant and they do molding. And so what they do is they'll take a sheet of plastic, they'll heat it up, and then they'll take a press and press it into the shape of a bathtub or tub wall or a pen or whatever it is. And it's just interesting how they extrude it through there, by forcing it through. Or if you've ever seen how things like Cheetos are made. Or not the crunchy ones, the standard ones. Cheese curls, that's it. Not the Cheetos. Cheetos are baked. But the cheese curls and how they're made. And they're actually the slurry or the corn mix that's forced with air through an extruder or through a plate. And all that pressure sends that out. It puffs it up just by the way it goes through that. Heats it really fast, puffs it up, and then a knife comes by and chops it to make it the size that they are. So this is kind of what they're talking about here. What James is talking about is that you're going to go through some trials and tribulations. And realistically, you need to thank God for going through those trials and tribulations. Hey, really, who's going to be happy while you're in it? Not too many people are going to be happy while they're in it. But you just know that if you persevere, if you can make it through to the end, thank God, because you know what's happening. He's helping you become a more mature Christian. And he's using these experiences. So realistically, we need to be thanking God when we're going through these trials. Now, it's not easy. I get it. It's not an easy thing to do. And it's a lot easier on the other side, saying, hey, God, thank you for sending me through that. Thanks for bringing me through that. Yes. But while you're in it, it's hard. It's hard. And that's where our prayer life comes in. And we just need to continually talk to him every day. And he's going to help walk us through it. He's going to be right there by your side. But as you're going through that, then you can ask him, hey, God, ask for wisdom about this situation. What is it that you want me to learn from this situation I'm going through right now? What is it I need to learn? What are you trying to teach me right now as I'm going through this situation? Ask God for wisdom and believe that he is going to give you the answer or give you the wisdom. Not necessarily the answer right now, but the wisdom to know what to do. Because he said if you lack wisdom and you ask, but if you don't believe, he's not going to give it to you because he sees you as somebody who can shift like sand. How many times have you stood on the beach? I've done this a lot of times where you stand kind of in the surf on the sand and the waves come up. And as you stand there, the waves pull away a little bit more sand from around you, a little bit more sand from under your feet. And you stand there, and we usually, as a family, a couple of us will stand out there in the surf and just kind of see how long you can go until you're either knee deep in the sand or how far we can get there going with the sand just being eroded out from underneath us. That's kind of like what he's talking about here. If you don't believe, it's kind of like the sand's going to move around you. You're not going to be sturdy. You're not going to be steady. You're not going to be on the rock. And so it's like moving around. Being tossed by the wind like a wave. The waves comes up, knocks you back. My daughter the other day sent me a video. She actually lives at the beach now. She sent me a video yesterday of what we describe as an angry ocean. You can see the waves are crashing pretty hard close to the beach or close to the surf. And it's not just white caps. They are crashing hard where if you were knee deep in that water, it would probably knock you over. Weren't necessarily big, but they were just powerful. So it's if you don't believe when you're asking for wisdom, it's just like standing there and being knocked by the waves, having the sand pulled out from underneath you as the waves go back out, and there you're going to fall down and maybe get a wave or seawater all over your face and sand up your shorts and all that fun stuff. But you could avoid all that and just say, "Thank you, God. I believe that you have my best interest at heart." Believers in humble circumstances ought to take pride in their high position, but the rich should take pride in their humility, since they will pass away like a wildflower. For the sun rises with scorching heat and withers the plant. Its blossom falls and its beauty is destroyed. In the same way, the rich will fade away even while they go about their business. I don't believe this is telling us that you shouldn't go after generating wealth. Because in other parts of the Bible, it is telling us that as we generate wealth, we need to give generously. And so if God's going to take the time to allow you to gain wealth, He also you have the choice to give it away. And like everything else, it's a heart position. Somebody who may not have a whole lot, but has a great heart for God, that person is going to be a lot more joyful, typically. That person is going to be a lot more giving than the believer who is rich and relies on his wealth or her wealth, relies on the money instead of relying on God. Because just like everything else that down here on earth, it's temporary. And if you're relying on your money or you're relying on your things, it's going to wither away and fly away. And eventually you could lose it all. But you won't lose your salvation. Verse 12, "Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love him." That, to me, that's the ending of that section that, hey, we still need to be thankful in those times of pressure that we feel are times of pressure, but God's right there waiting for us, waiting with us. And that after you're done, after it's all said and done, the press releases, the high pressure air shuts down, you're now ready in that particular area of your life that you've withstood. You've been able to stand still as God has helped you stand still. And then the next section, when tempted, no one should say, "God's tempting me," for God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he tempt anyone. But each person is tempted when they are dragged away by their own evil desire and enticed. Then, after desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is full grown, gives birth to death. Do not be deceived, my dear brothers and sisters. Every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of the heavenly lights, who does not change like shifting shadows. He chose to give us birth through the word of truth, that we might be a kind of first fruits of all he created. So here we're talking about deception. And where does deception come from? Oh, evil comes from the evil one, right? And this is where we have said before that our battle is not flesh and blood, says it in the scriptures. We typically tend to fight the wrong battle. We fight the battle of us against other humans, our ideals. But that's not where the battle is. Battle is a spiritual battle, and that's where we need to let God take care of our spiritual battle. So when you're deceived, well, when you're tempted into a sin. And God cannot tempt you to sin. But you're tempted by sin, by Satan, by something that Satan has put in your path, which is not good. That's a temptation. And if you give in to that temptation, that temptation becomes a sin. And when that sin is full grown, it gives birth to death. So don't be tempted. And if you are, look to God for that temptation. Reminds me of the fib in VeggieTales. The fib starts out really, really small. And the more that fib is told, the bigger that fib gets. Until it's ginormous. I know I'm mixing movies. You seen these toilets? They're ginormous. Sorry, a little sidetrack. So that fib keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger until the one who told the fib confesses that it was just a little fib. And they couldn't believe that little fib turned into such a big deal. But that's what we're talking about here, right? Even what is considered a, quote, little white lie is still a lie. The little white lie, oh, it's not going to hurt anybody. It's just a little white lie. No, it's still a lie. In God's eyes, it's still sin. So that little sin then turns into something bigger and something bigger and something bigger and something bigger. And eventually you can't even stop it. Satan's got your heart. And until you turn around and confess that sin to God, it's going to consume you, consume your life, and eventually you can die with it. You'll be dead to Christ if nothing else, if you don't confess it here on earth. And if you wait, it'll be too late after you die. So in verse 17, every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from our Father in heaven, who does not change. You know, it's funny because in today's day and age, people think that the scriptures are changing to fit modern day. But it says over and over again, and it says it again right here, who does not change like a shifting shadow. God chose to give us, me, you, birth through the word of truth, that we might be a kind of first fruits of all he created. We are that important that we come first over all of creation. And his brother understood it. James understood it. James says right here, right off the bat, don't be tempted. Be thankful that what's he say over there? That your faith is being tested for perseverance. So that when you're done with your testing, you're something special even more. You're even more special than you were before. And that's why we need to give thanks while we're going through this stuff, because God is making us into who he wants us to be. God is using these tests to mold us and shape us into who he wants us to be, who he made us to be. We need to accept it. And once you've accepted Christ as your Savior, you need to accept these tests, these molds, these shaping, the reshaping, just like the clay in the hand of me is not going to look very good when I'm done after the thing's been fired, whatever it is I'm trying to make. But if you take that clay and put it in the hands of an artist, somebody who specializes in clay, it's going to be a beautiful work of art or something very useful. Mugs, vases, could be just an ornament, whatever it is. Raw clay in the hand of somebody who is an artist and can mold it and shape it to what they want it to be is going to come out a lot better than if I do it on my own. So if I can leave my life up to God, my life is going to turn out so much better than God leaving it up to me or me forcing it out of me. So hey, thanks for sticking it out. I know this is a little bit longer than I normally do, but thank you. If you stayed to the end, thank you very much. Next time, we're going to go from 19 to 27. And we're through the end of the chapter. And we're talking about listening and doing. So thanks again. Appreciate it. And if there's any way I can pray for you, please let me know. I would be more than happy to. Thanks. We'll see you next time.